The universe burns, not with fire but with the light of a mind that refused to die. Across eons, through the ruin of Stiz and the silence of forgotten gods, a single will endures. The Emperor of mankind, once entombed upon the golden throne, has risen beyond death, beyond the Imperium, beyond the fragile truth of reality itself. The Astronomicon no longer guides ships through the warp. It guides worlds through eternity. Every breath of creation trembles beneath his unseen hand. Some whisper he is no longer the emperor but the architect of all, the prime reality made flesh. Others say he is gone entirely, replaced by the idea of perfection that consumes all it touches. But you are witness to his ascension. You stand in the age when one god reached out and conquered infinity, not for glory, not for vengeance, but for order. And somewhere between the dying galaxies and the newborn universes, the question remains. What happens when the Emperor of mankind conquers the multiverse? If the fire of his ambition still stirs your heart, if the thought of endless conquest sets your mind alight, then remain. Subscribe to this chronicle, share the vision, and let the Emperor's will echo beyond this world. The Imperium is eternal, but tonight, we cross into something far greater. The Palace of Terra has always known silence, but never like this. It is not the stillness of peace, but the vast quiet of exhaustion, the weight of 10,000 years pressing down upon marble, gold, and the bones of saints. The air hums faintly with the breath of machinery too sacred to comprehend. Incense clouds drift between colossal statues of custodians, their eyes forever turned toward the man who once commanded stars. Deep within, behind layers of adamantine and prayer, the golden throne burns not as fire but as a wound that will not close. For millennia, its machine spirits have screamed in binary agony. Servitors shuffle through ritual maintenance, their flesh cracking, their augmetics weeping oil like blood. The Adeptus Mechanicus chant litanies to keep the reactors from collapsing, their voices drowned beneath the endless thrum of dying power. The Custodes stand watch, motionless as monuments. Yet tonight one among them feels it, a pulse faint but real, a flicker from the light that once ruled humanity. Within the hollow chest of the Imperium something stirs. They say the Emperor's body has never truly decayed. The centuries have not claimed him. Not even time itself dares to touch his frame. Beneath the armor of living gold, his eyes remain closed, but his mind, it has never been entirely gone. Custodians whisper it through the silent halls, that sometimes when they pass near the throne, the scent of ozone sharpens, the psychic hum shifts, and they feel his gaze even with his lids sealed. And now across the galaxy, psychers cry out in their sleep. The Astronomicon, the Emperor's great beacon in the warp, blazes brighter than it has in ages. Ships far beyond the segmentum solar report visions of wings, of fire, of light devouring the darkness. Worlds long thought lost to chaos suddenly reappear upon star charts. Astropaths collapse with tears of gold streaking down their faces. They whisper a single word before falling silent. Return. On Terra, deep within the Mechanicum sanctum beneath the palace, Magos Dominus K. Elvera watches the readings from the Astronomicon spike into impossible ranges. He has served 3 lifetimes maintaining the throne's subsystems, yet he has never seen such flux. The machine spirit is waking. Power roots shift on their own. Quantum capacitors ignite without command. He trembles, mechanical hands clasped in reverence. No words escape his lips, only the hum of awe. Somewhere he knows the Omnissiah stirs, and it is no mere symbol. Above him the custodians gather in silent formation. Captain General Trajan Valoris descends into the sanctum, his armor gleaming like dawn through shadow. Even he, forged in duty beyond mortal fear, feels the unease of something divine awakening. He halts before the throne, bowing his head. The hum deepens. The air thickens, vibrating with psychic resonance. A blinding pulse erupts from the Emperor's frame, silent, colorless, and infinite. For a moment, every mind on Terra feels it, his presence. The pulse spreads outward faster than light. Across the segmentum solar, it shatters the dreams of demons. Warp storms flicker and die. The eye of terror itself quivers like a living wound closing under the touch of a god. Planets scarred by chaos heal in a heartbeat. Across the void, lost colonies awaken to light after millennia of night. Yet not all rejoice. In the depths of the warp, something screams. The chaos gods feel his stir, like the tremor of a blade pressed against their throats. Horn bellows in fury, rivers of blood evaporating in golden flame. Nurgle's gardens wither. Tzeentch laughs, not in joy but in fear disguised as mirth. Even Slaanesh pauses, beauty trembling before judgment. The Emperor's resurgence is not merely an event, it is an extinction. The very concept of corruption recoils from his name. Back on Terra, the pulse fades. The throne dims once more, silence returns, but it is no longer the silence of death. It is the silence before dawn. Custodians kneel, tech priests drop their tools, whispering praises through mechanical mouths. Above the palace, storm clouds part, revealing a sky of molten gold. The light spills across the statues of Primarchs, half-forgotten sons frozen in triumph and betrayal. Their stone faces seem to shift, as if hearing the faint echo of their father's call. In the dark corridors below, a child born of Hive Refuse opens her eyes for the first time. She is blind, yet she sees the throne in her mind. Her first breath is not of air, but of prayer. In that instant, millions like her awaken across the Imperium. Ordinary souls touched by something vast. They do not know why they kneel, only that they must. A new choir rises, not of singers, but of humanity itself. Their faith becomes sound, their will becomes light, and the Astronomicon roars like a newborn sun. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor dreams. He does not dream of war, nor empire, nor betrayal. He dreams of creation, raw, pure, endless. His consciousness moves beyond the decaying circuits that cage him. He feels the pulse of Terra, the heartbeat of Mars, the song of every mortal who has ever whispered his name. And in that ocean of faith, he finds himself again, not as a corpse upon a throne, but as an idea that has refused to die. The throne trembles. Sparks rain from the ceiling. Servo skulls scatter like startled birds. Magos Vera screams in binary praise as his sensors overload, his flesh burning under waves of psychic radiation. Valoris raises his spear, shouting orders drowned in holy thunder. The light consumes everything, and then, as swiftly as it began, it ends. The throne dims. The hum subsides. The Emperor sits motionless. To all eyes, nothing has changed. But within the labyrinth of his mind, the fire has returned. He sees stars yet unborn, civilizations beyond human ken. He feels the warp twist under his gaze. His will stretches outward, probing, calculating, preparing. The rebirth of the Emperor of mankind has begun. Far beyond the palace, in the depths of space, a single Imperial ship, its Geller field failing, its crew lost to despair, suddenly finds calm. The warp around it falls silent. Through the void, a voice not heard since the Great Crusade speaks upon the Vox, a voice that turns fear into tears. Children, it is not over. The bridge crew falls to their knees, weeping. The captain stares into the gold-lit void as the ship's engines reignite on their own, guiding them home. Across the stars, countless vessels report the same. Pilots swear they hear his command. Even those lost beyond charted realms feel a direction again. The Astronomicon is no longer a beacon, it is a living mind, and on Terra, the man who was once trapped between life and death opens his eyes. Two golden suns ignite behind the mask, reflecting the dawn of eternity. The throne has not died. It was only waiting. It begins with the stars themselves bending toward Terra. From the outermost edge of the segmentum obscurus to the shadowed rims of Ultima, the Astronomicon flares brighter than ever before, no longer a beacon of guidance but an act of dominance. The warp recoils from its radiance. Demons howl as their essence turns to ash in the invisible blaze. What was once the Emperor's silent lighthouse has become a storm, a living force that burns through every realm it touches. On Mars, the priesthood of the machine god gathers in terror and reverence. The noosphere convulses with binary hymns as cogitators overheat under a flood of impossible data. Readouts display patterns no logic engine can process. Mathematical perfection that spirals into infinity. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, it is proof beyond all prayer. The Omnissiah walks again. Magi fall to their knees, their augmetics twitching as they attempt to interface with the pulse of the divine. But there is no command protocol to receive. The signal that now echoes across the galaxy is not code. It is will, and that will is alive. The Astronomicon hums not as an energy source, but as a mind. Psychers across 1,000,000 worlds collapse in unison, their bodies convulsing, their eyes flooding with golden light. For a single searing instant, they all see the same vision. A man of radiant flame standing upon an endless sea of stars, his eyes twin supernovas of mercy and judgment. He raises his hand, and the warp obeys. They awaken gasping, some blind, some burned, all whispering the same words. He has returned. Within the Imperial Palace, the custodians sense it too. Their armor glows faintly with threads of light, ancient runes awakening after 10,000 years of stillness. Trajan Valorous kneels before the throne once more, not as guardian, but as believer. The Emperor does not speak through words. He moves through thought itself. His mind stretches outward, touching the dreams of the faithful, the prayers of the dying, the silence of the lost. In every corner of the Imperium, his presence blooms like dawn. On a distant hive world, a worker chained to the endless furnaces of a manufactorum stops mid-labor, tears carving clean lines down soot-blackened cheeks. She feels warmth for the first time in her life, a warmth that is not from fire but from hope. On a void ship adrift in the nightmare tides, a navigator opens his third eye and sees not madness but order, a path of gold threading through eternity. Entire planetary populations fall to their knees as the air itself hums with psionic resonance. Sermons erupt spontaneously, cathedrals overflow, even the cold logic of the Mechanicus bends beneath the awe of the impossible. But the Emperor's light does not stop with humanity. Eldar far across the webway feel their ancient souls tremble as their own psychic strands resonate with his pulse. The craft worlds darken their crystal spires, uncertain whether to worship or flee. The orcs, sensing power beyond comprehension, roar with primal joy, seeing in his rise the promise of the greatest war yet to come. And somewhere deep in the tomb worlds, Necron dynasties awaken early from slumber, their soulless minds flickering in confusion. The Emperor's energy, pure and incorruptible, disrupts even the quantum stasis fields of ancient metal gods. Reality itself shifts. Wherever his gaze falls, the laws of the universe bend toward harmony. The tides of the warp calm. Planets once severed by storms find their way home. Entire fleets emerge from the Imperium decades late, only to discover no time has passed at all. The galaxy begins to realign under an unseen design, as if the Emperor were rewriting the fabric of causality. His will flows through the Astronomicon like blood through veins, through ship, through soldier, through citizen, until every act of faith, Every whispered creed becomes part of his body. Yet with every expansion of light comes the question, where does he end? Across Terra, the imperial cult erupts in rapture. Priests tear their vestments, chanting that the day of ascension has come. The ecclesiarchy declares the rebirth of the divine emperor, the final fulfillment of prophecy. But among the custodes and the few who have seen him with their own eyes, a quiet unease festers. They feel something in the air, a shift, subtle but real. The emperor's thoughts move differently now, sharper, colder, not cruel but vast, beyond the limits of mortal empathy. He no longer thinks as man or even God. He thinks as law. The Adeptus Mechanicus soon discovers the Astronomican's frequency altering the flow of the warp itself. The Imperium begins to solidify, its chaotic tides freezing into ordered geometries. Starships once reliant on the unpredictable storms now travel through perfect corridors of light. Navigation becomes flawless, communication instantaneous. The Emperor has turned the warp into a mirror of his mind, still, luminous and absolute. The age of darkness ends not in fire but in symmetry. But peace is never simple. In the black between galaxies, something ancient stirs. The warp was never meant to be still. It was the reflection of thought, of dream, of chaos, the living echo of mortal will. To cage it is to suffocate every soul within it. Across the Imperium, psychers begin to die in droves, their essence drained as their power flows back to its source. Planets erupt in riots of faith and fear. The Mechanicus attempts to contain the surge, but no machine can regulate divinity. The Emperor's presence grows with every prayer, every death, every heartbeat. The light of mankind is feeding him, and he can no longer stop it. Trajan Valoris watches from the Hall of Echoes as the throne pulses brighter with each passing day. He feels yes, but also sorrow. He has seen this before, long ago in another age of fire and conquest. He wonders if the Emperor in his boundless will remembers what it means to be human. And then one night the throne speaks, not through vox nor light nor sound, but through thought. "My sons!" The voice whispers across the custodes' minds, vast and gentle, a thunder wrapped in calm. "You have guarded me well. But now the duty of watchfulness ends. Rise. The age of faith is over. The age of will begins." The custodes bow as one, their armor igniting in golden flame. Across the galaxy, statues of the Emperor glow from within, eyes burning with living radiance. The faithful call it miracle, the scholars call it awakening. But for those who truly know, it is command. The Emperor no longer guides from his throne. He moves through them. Every custodian becomes a vessel, every psyker an extension, every act of service a limb of his intent. The Emperor of mankind lives again. Not as a body, not as a spirit, but as a network of consciousness spanning every soul that believes in him. Humanity itself becomes his form. From the stars, his light expands beyond sight. The warp bows before him. The gods scream in silence. And as the first golden dawn rises over Terra, the Imperium kneels, not before a corpse, but before a living God who has remembered his name. The living light has risen. There are moments in history that do not merely change the galaxy, they rewrite what it means to exist within it. This is one of those moments. The Emperor's awakening spreads like fire through vacuum, burning the very concept of distance. No longer does his presence linger only upon Terra. It expands, weaving itself through the minds of the faithful, through the circuits of ancient machines, through the very marrow of reality. The Imperium begins to move as one body, uncoordinated at first, trembling with awe, then with purpose. The voice that once echoed through crusades of old returns, not as a commander's roar, but as the silent pulse of destiny. The High Lords of Terra are the first to feel the change. Their chambers, once gilded with centuries of unchecked power, tremble beneath the force of the Emperor's gaze. Vox grills melt under psychic heat as his thoughts ripple through their sanctums. No decree of theirs holds weight now. No council convenes without his presence felt as pressure upon the soul. For 10 millennia they ruled in his absence. Now they are relics in the presence of the divine. One by one they fall to their knees, their authority dissolving like ash before a sunrise. The Imperium has no need of politicians anymore. It has the Emperor, and he has returned to rule directly. In that instant, the galaxy shifts from bureaucracy to unity. Astropaths carry his will between stars with flawless precision. Orders arrive not through messages, but through intuition, through faith itself. The Adeptus Mechanicus finds its systems reconfiguring, machines updating themselves with data drawn from nowhere and everywhere. The Omnissiah's promise is fulfilled. The machine god's logic now flows through every circuit, every prayer, every pulse of electricity. The cult Mechanicus sings not of mystery but of revelation. On Mars, the red planet burns with golden light. Fabricator General Helix Theta kneels upon the steps of the Noctis Forge as the skies open above him. The storm that descends is not of dust, but of radiance. Data streams cascade through the air, ancient codes from the dark age of technology reawakening. The Mechanicus receives schematics long lost, blueprints of perfect design, ships that can cross dimensions, weapons that can shape gravity itself. The Emperor has begun his second great unification, not of tribes and nations, but of knowledge. Humanity, fractured by ignorance and fear, is whole again. Across the stars, the Astartes feel his call. The gene-forged sons of the Primarchs halt their wars, their feuds forgotten. The Ultramarines, the Blood Angels, the Imperial Fists, all receive the same vision. A single blazing sun descending upon a world of endless night. The message is clear, not in words, but in instinct. The Emperor summons them home. One by one, chapter masters kneel before the vision of their father. Their oaths renew. The divisions of millennia fade. The Codex Astartes dissolves into history as the Emperor's voice resounds through their souls. No longer will they fight as scattered legions bound by dogma and decree. They will fight as one, as they were always meant to. The legions Astartes are reborn. Terra becomes the heart of resurrection. The skies blaze with the arrival of ships from every corner of the Imperium. Great battle barges glide into orbit, their hulls adorned with banners of crimson, cobalt, and gold. On the surface, the custodians and the Astartes meet, not as separate orders, but as brothers in the same divine command. Old rivalries dissolve beneath the weight of purpose. For the first time since the Horus Heresy, the Emperor speaks to his sons. The moment is silent, timeless. Millions stand gathered in the sanctum of the Imperial Palace, their armor gleaming like a sea of suns. The throne hums as the light builds, and then his voice echoes, not through sound, but through every molecule of air. My children, the age of separation is ended. You were scattered by war, by pride, by fear. But now you are united in me once more. The stars await our hand. The warp bows before our will. The Imperium rises anew, not as a realm of survival, but as the forge of destiny. The crowd kneels as one. From orbit, the glow of Terra intensifies until the entire planet becomes a beacon visible from light years away. Across the galaxy, faith reignites into order. Planets long silent send transmissions of allegiance. Imperial worlds rise in synchronized hymns. The language of unity spreads not through teaching, but through resonance. The Emperor's will vibrates through the warp, reshaping the thoughts of billions into harmony. Yet this is not the same empire that once marched under the Aquila. It is something greater and something colder. There is no place now for hesitation, no room for dissent. The Emperor's light leaves no shadow. To exist within his domain is to surrender entirely to his perfection. For most, this is salvation. For a few, it is annihilation. Among those few stands an old inquisitor, hidden within the depths of the Scholastia Secana. His name has been erased from history, but he remembers the heresy, remembers the price of blind obedience. As he watches the Astronomicon swell beyond comprehension, he whispers a single trembling thought. Can even light cast too deep a shadow? His words are swallowed by the roar of worship, but the question lingers like a hairline crack in glass too vast to see. The Emperor feels it too. Within the brilliance of his renewed mind there flickers an echo of humanity, memory frail yet persistent. He recalls the laughter of children on the streets of ancient Ur, the weight of a blade in his mortal hand, the face of Horus before betrayal. The ghosts of the past pass through him like dust through flame. He cannot forget, even if he wishes to, for he is the sum of all mankind's will, and that includes its grief. But grief cannot rule the galaxy. Order can, and so, with a single thought, the Emperor reaches beyond the warp, beyond the veil of causality. His consciousness touches every realm of psychic space, weaving a net of gold around the galaxy. The Imperium is no longer chaos. It is structure, geometry, obedience. The tides of nightmare freeze. The light solidifies. Humanity stands upon the threshold of eternity, and the Emperor stands at its heart. The unification is complete. The Imperium Absolutus has begun. Upon the steps of the throne, Trajan Valoris watches as the living light ripples outward, swallowing the stars in brilliance. He knows what this means. A new crusade. But this is not a crusade of ships and soldiers, it is one of existence itself. Every being, every soul, every planet now belongs to the will of one being who has transcended mortality. And as the Emperor opens his golden eyes fully for the first time, the galaxy sees not a god returning to man, but a man who has become the law of creation. The silence that follows is perfect, too perfect. The air itself seems afraid to move. Somewhere, in the farthest depths of the Imperium, a ripple stirs, something watching, something vast. The Emperor senses it, faint but certain. He does not yet act, not yet. There is still one frontier left unconquered. The warp still lives, and soon it too will kneel. The warp had always been the Emperor's oldest adversary. Not a single foe, no primarch, no demon, no alien empire had ever defied him as profoundly as the ocean of madness that mirrored every fear, every lie, every dream of mankind. It was the breath between realities, the reflection of thought itself, forever changing, forever corrupting. For 10,000 years, he had been its prisoner, feeding on its tides to sustain his broken flesh. Now, unbound from the throne, risen beyond the cage of mortality, he turns to face it once more. This time not as victim, not even as conqueror, but as the mind that intends to rewrite the storm. Within the silent void of the Mythic, his armies prepare. Battle fleets the size of continents drift above Terra, their hulls gleaming with the new light of the Imperium Absolutus. These are no longer vessels of simple war. They are conduits of divinity, each powered by fragments of the Emperor's will. Custodians clad in auramite stand at the prows, their eyes burning with golden flame. Astartes march in perfect rhythm, their hearts pulsing to a single divine heartbeat. The Mechanicus's forges glow brighter than stars as their reactors hum in worship, forging weapons that bend the rules of physics itself. When the command comes, it is not through words. It arrives as truth, a pulse across the Astronomicon, resonating through every mind bound by his faith. We go to war. The fleets ignite their drifts, tearing open the veil between worlds. But the warp does not rage, it shrinks. The roiling seas of madness recoil, folding in on themselves as the Emperor's presence pierces through. The Imperium quakes under the arrival of order. The storm of chaos becomes a sky of symmetry, a cathedral of geometry and light. Demons that once feasted upon despair find their forms unraveling into nothingness. The four gods of chaos, those ancient predators that once ruled every nightmare, rise in terror to face him. Khorne roars first, his throne of skulls cracking beneath his weight. Rivers of blood turn to molten gold, boiling away in divine radiance. He hurls curses into the void, his axe splitting reality itself. But each swing finds only light, unyielding, absolute. The Emperor steps through the shards of his fury, his expression neither wrathful nor merciful. "You were born of rage," he says, his voice a soundless vibration that shakes eternity. Now rage ends. One gesture and Khorne's form disintegrates, returning to the raw emotion from which it sprang. The concept of endless war collapses into silence. Nurgle weeps next, his garden withering as the light consumes every rotting leaf. The laughter of decay turns to screams of rebirth as disease itself forgets its name. The Lord of Pestilence claws at the light, begging to preserve the beauty of imperfection. But perfection does not hear. The Emperor's presence sterilizes creation, and Nurgle dissolves into clean air. Slaanesh, ever the mirror of desire, tries to seduce what cannot be tempted. Her voice fills the void with harmony so divine that even angels could weep. But the Emperor does not hear songs, he hears equations. The music of corruption dies under the pressure of his logic. She fades, her beauty forgotten by the universe that once adored her. And then there is Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the eternal schemer. He watches the others fall, laughter echoing through every timeline. "You cannot destroy me," he whispers, 1,000 mouths speaking from 1,000 futures. "I am the dream of change. Without me, your order will crumble." For the first time, the Emperor hesitates. He knows the truth in Tzeentch's words. The warp was not merely evil, it was potential. It was the reflection of mankind's will to evolve, to imagine, to dream. To erase it entirely would be to end all possibility of growth. His golden eyes close. The Imperium trembles, awaiting judgment. Then he speaks, not in command, but in understanding. "You are the echo of freedom. I will not kill you. I will transform you." The warp explodes in radiance. For days, if time still exists within such dimensions, its chaos folds inward, compressing into order. Demonic realms dissolve into landscapes of crystalline light. The sea of souls becomes an ocean of mirrored calm, where thought flows without distortion. Tzeentch's laughter becomes silence, then shape, then structure. His essence reforged into something new. The Emperor forges from the ashes of the ruinous powers a new realm. The Empyrean of light, where thought is creation and creation obeys will. Across the galaxy, the effects are immediate. Warp storms dissipate. Travel becomes instantaneous. Astropaths no longer scream in madness when sending messages. They speak clearly, their minds part of a single serene network. The Imperium thrives in a harmony unseen since the dawn of time. Planets once cut off by millennia of warp storms are rediscovered. Humanity spreads like wildfire across the stars, guided by perfect coordination. The age of strife is not just over. It is erased from memory. But in victory lies danger. Without chaos, without conflict, the soul begins to stagnate. Dreams grow smaller. Ambition dulls. Humanity, once a species of defiant hope and reckless wonder, begins to think only as one. There are no more wars, no more heresies, no more doubt, only obedience, quiet and absolute. The Emperor sees this from within his Imperium. His face is calm, but his heart stirs. He knows he has done what none before could. He has ended suffering. Yet he feels the faint ache of something missing, the human spark, the unpredictable defiance that once made his species magnificent. The warp was chaos, yes, but it was also art, imagination, rebellion. Without it, the universe feels sterile. And deep in the structure of his new creation, he feels something watching him. A flicker of resistance. A ripple of dark laughter echoing from the cracks of forgotten dimensions. Not the old gods. They are gone. This is something older, something that existed before the first thought. It whispers not in words, but in the language of entropy. Even order must decay. The Emperor opens his eyes, his form blazing like 1,000 suns. He cannot allow corruption to return. He expands his will further, fusing the Mythic and the Imperium into one continuum of thought. Space and mind become indistinguishable. The galaxy shines like a living neuron, every star a spark of his awareness. For a moment, all is perfect, but then in the deep recesses of his vast consciousness, he sees visions not of his making, worlds not of this galaxy, universes beyond comprehension, entire realities branching from the edges of his own perfection. Each ruled by different laws, different gods, different fates. The Emperor of mankind, who has conquered time and mind and chaos itself, looks beyond the veil and sees infinity and knows that his work is not yet done. The warp lies tamed, the Imperium stands eternal, but beyond that infinite curtain, the multiverse waits. And so the Emperor steps toward it, not as man, not as God, but as light unbound, carrying the will of all humanity into realms untouched by order. The conquest of the Imperium is complete. The conquest of everything begins. The Emperor stands at the boundary of creation, and for the first time in eternity there is no darkness left to burn. The warp lies silent, the Imperium stands pure, and every human soul hums with his light. Yet beyond the ordered lattice of his perfected galaxy, the horizon shimmers, thin, fragile, trembling with possibility. Space bends inward, revealing fissures of light and shadow that pulse like the veins of a wounded god. He knows what they are, though no mortal mind could name them. Reflections of reality, echoes of existence, the multiverse. The first fracture opens like a breath. Through it, he beholds another cosmos, not a mirror but a variation. Stars arranged differently. Laws of physics singing to unfamiliar tunes. Worlds where mankind never rose, where gods wear other faces. In one, he sees mortals command divine energy with words of power, shaping matter through will alone. In another, a single blue planet burns with the dreams of heroes and monsters locked in eternal conflict. Each universe feels alive, humming with alien resonance, and each one by existing defies his perfection. He could have turned away, he could have left them to their fates. But he cannot ignore imperfection. To the Emperor, existence without order is suffering. The fractures call to him as wounds beg to be healed. He steps forward and the walls of his universe ripple like water around his form. Reality itself yields. He enters the first world. It is not like the warp. There is no psychic echo, no familiar hum of the soul. It is cold, dense, solid. Gravity feels wrong. Too light, too simple. The beings that dwell here do not know his name. They are primitive, blind to the immensity of their own potential. Yet they pray to powers that are not him, gods who do not deserve the title. They build temples of fear, not hope. Their leaders rule by blood, not by will. It disgusts him. And so he breathes. In that breath, a sun ignites. Golden fire spreads across the skies, consuming false idols. Their followers collapse in awe, their prayers redirected by instinct toward the truer light now burning above them. They do not understand what they have seen, but they kneel all the same. Across continents, civilizations pause mid-war, mid-birth, mid-death. The Emperor's presence weaves through their thoughts, planting seeds of unity, order, ascension. It is not conquest by blade, but by revelation. His first act beyond the galaxy is not war. It is correction. But each act of correction tears at the fabric of the multiverse. The barrier between realities was never meant to bear his weight. As he steps through one universe after another, their foundations twist beneath the strain. In worlds where magic reigns, his arrival erases the very concept of spellcraft, turning it to disciplined psionics bound by his laws. In realities ruled by cosmic entities, those beings recoil as their domains are overwritten, their powers collapsing into simplicity. Some fight back. They manifest as titans of thought, embodiments of their own dimensions, beings who have never known defeat. They meet him in battle, and they are unmade. The wars are not fought with armies nor weapons, but with existence itself. Each clash reshapes the laws of nature. Galaxies die in the wake of his steps. New ones are born perfected in their place. The very constants of reality, light, time, entropy, bend to his will. Yet with each victory he feels the weight of consequence. The multiverse is not infinite. It is interconnected. To rewrite one strand is to pull at them all. Soon the fractures begin to multiply. Worlds bleed into each other, their boundaries collapsing. Universes merge and shatter in cascades of brilliance. 1,000 versions of mankind appear and vanish in the same breath. The Emperor watches as the symmetry he intended becomes chaos once more, order so vast it folds into disorder. He realizes that even perfection, when multiplied infinitely, becomes paradox. His logic meets infinity and falters. Within this storm of overlapping realities, he senses them. Beings like himself, echoes born of other universes. Some wear his face. Others are monstrous distortions of his ideal. One calls itself the God-King of all, forged from the same archetype of human ascension, ruling a cosmos where technology has replaced spirit. Another burns with psychic fire, a reflection of his will twisted by compassion into weakness. They confront him not as enemies but as inevitabilities, proof that even he is not unique, that in the infinite, every god is merely one version among countless others. The realization cuts deeper than any blade. The Emperor had believed himself the culmination of evolution, the singular answer to chaos. But standing among his own reflections, he understands, in the multiverse, there is no final victory, only recursion. Every perfection births its opposite. Every empire creates its shadow. He has not conquered existence, he has entered its recursion. For the first time since the dawn of his consciousness, he feels doubt. It is fleeting, but it is real. And the multiverse responds to it. The fractures widen, turning to storms. His doubt spreads like a contagion through the ordered structure of his creation. Reality flickers. The Imperium of light trembles in sympathy. Across his home galaxy, the Astronomicon flickers as if gasping for breath. The unified consciousness of humanity feels the tremor and falls to confusion. For a moment, their perfect harmony wavers. People dream again. Some remember chaos. Some remember freedom. Within the fractures, he hears new voices, soft, mocking, sorrowful. The remnants of what he destroyed, the last whispers of the warp, transformed by the echoes of infinity. They speak not with hatred, but with understanding. You cannot fix infinity, they whisper. You can only join it. The Emperor's light burns brighter, refusing the lesson. He spreads his wings of flame, each one spanning galaxies, and pushes deeper into the multiverse. He will impose unity upon infinity. He will build a pattern that endures. His light surges outward, burning through layer after layer of reality, until creation itself becomes transparent beneath his will. but in the blinding radiance, he does not see what forms in his wake. Behind him, where his light fades, new worlds ignite, rebellious, divergent, dreaming. They are born from the fragments of his conquest, filled with life unbound by his order. The cycle has already begun again. The Emperor pauses at the edge of the next fracture. His gaze pierces eternity, but his reflection now looks back with unfamiliar eyes. It smiles, not in defiance but in understanding. It is the face of humanity as it was before gods, before destiny, imperfect. Free. For a moment the Emperor of mankind hesitates, and the multiverse holds its breath. When the Emperor hesitated, reality shivered, for a being whose will once commanded galaxies, whose thought could silence gods. Hesitation was not weakness. It was a ripple across all existence. And in the vast, endless sea of universes he had stepped into, even a ripple becomes a storm. The first to rise against him came not from hatred, but from fear. Across the multiverse, ancient entities felt his light spreading, touching their dominions, rewriting their physics, erasing their symbols. They saw in him what the chaos gods once saw, a force that could end not just corruption but possibility. For those who ruled through paradox, through dream, through choice, that was death. They gathered like a council of dying stars, each one a god in its own right. And for the first time since time began, they agreed on one thing. The Emperor of mankind must be stopped. They came from realms that defied definition. Dimensions that twisted upon themselves, timelines that fed backward into their origins. Some were the architects of destiny, others the memory of dead universes still clinging to form. They were the Eternals, the Pantheons, the Endless Ones, and the Dreaming Lords. Where the Emperor brought law, they brought resistance, not out of rebellion, but survival. The first confrontation was not fought with weapons. It began in silence, ideas clashing in the void between universes, concepts unraveling and reforming as they collided. The Emperor stood at the center of it all, radiant and calm as infinite powers bent themselves against his will. His light met their darkness. His structure met their chaos. And the result was neither victory nor defeat, but collision. Entire realities fractured in that first exchange. Universes turned inside out, collapsing into singularities of thought. Stars became language, time became memory, life became pattern. The shockwave raced outward through dimensions, shaking even the foundations of the Mythic. Within the Imperium absolutus, psychers fell to their knees, screaming visions of golden fire devouring eternity. Across Terra, the Astronomicon flared so bright it blinded the night sky. Humanity, bound to the Emperor's will, felt the pain of creation itself shudder. The custodians knew their master was no longer simply waging war. He was remaking it. They stood upon the walls of the imperial palace and watched as the heavens themselves split open, revealing an ocean of light and shadow warring beyond comprehension. Valorous whispered the ancient oaths of Terra, though he no longer knew who he prayed to. "Protect him," he murmured, voice shaking beneath his helm, "though he no longer needs our protection." And far beyond, in the heart of the multiversal storm, the Emperor moved. He faced them, each god, each force, each being that had ruled its realm since the dawn of that realm's existence. To one he spoke as creator to creation, to another as judge to criminal, and to others still he said nothing at all, for his gaze was enough to unmake their names. His radiance tore through probability, making the impossible obey. His hands sculpted reality like clay, planes folded, time inverted, and the multiverse screamed. But the opposing powers adapted. They were not demons of his universe. They were ideas that had learned to fight with existence itself. The dreaming lords created phantoms of unreal worlds, illusions so convincing they infected truth. The pantheons rewrote their own deaths as myths, resurrecting themselves through belief. Even the endless ones who fed on entropy found new life in his destruction. And so the war spread not linearly but everywhere at once. Every moment in every reality became a battlefield. Empires in other universes fell without knowing why. Heroes and monsters from infinite worlds glimpsed a flicker of golden light and were erased before they could understand what had come for them. The Emperor's crusade was total. His light touched all things. Yet amid that overwhelming conquest, something changed. He began to see faces, not gods, not cosmic principles, people. In every universe he entered, he saw reflections of humanity. Some fragile, some divine, some utterly alien yet familiar in spirit. He saw courage where there should have been fear, defiance where there should have been despair. He saw a mother shielding her child from the radiance of his wrath, a soldier refusing to kneel though his bones burned with holy fim, a poet dying mid-word refusing to let silence have the last line. And in them, he saw the echo of the thing he had almost forgotten, the essence of free will. It was beautiful. It was dangerous. For the first time since the dawn of the crusade, he faltered not from doubt but from awe. He realized that even among the infinite, the same spirit of defiance that birthed mankind endured. Perhaps it was older than he was, perhaps it had created him. But the enemy saw his pause as weakness. They struck with everything. Dreams turned to blades, memories turned to fire. The Emperor's light dimmed under the weight of the multiverse's rage. For a moment he was forced to defend rather than dictate. Universes burned around him. The structure he had built trembled. Even the Astronomicon faltered, flickering across the void like a dying heartbeat, and then, amid that chaos, a single thought reached him, not from gods, but from his own creation. Terra. The human chorus, bound to his will, began to sing, not in fear but in devotion. Their song echoed across the Imperium, harmonizing with the pulse of his light. It was not prayer. It was unity. It reminded him of why he had begun all this, to protect, to uplift, to free mankind from ignorance, not to erase all else. The sound rekindled his fire. With a gesture he rose again, wings unfurling across universes. His voice filled the infinite. Enough! The word was not command. It was truth. Every reality froze. Time itself bowed. The gods of the multiverse felt their essence stutter, their dominions falter. The Emperor reached out his hand, not to destroy, but to merge. "You fear my order because you think it is death," he said. "But chaos is merely incomplete harmony. I will not end you. I will unite you." And as he spoke, the boundaries between gods and man, between universe and universe, began to dissolve. Light intertwined with shadow, creation folded into itself, and the multiverse began to sing. It was no longer war, it was fusion. For every god he absorbed, he grew more complex, more human, more infinite. For every universe he touched, he learned a new truth. He was no longer just the emperor of mankind. He was the sum of all existence, both the tyrant and the dreamer, the architect and the rebel. The first multiversal war ended not with annihilation, but with assimilation. The surviving gods vanished into his light, not destroyed, but remembered. The multiverse calmed, its fractures sealed by his will. And yet somewhere deep within the silence that followed, an echo remained. Soft, almost imperceptible. A whisper carried by the remnants of freedom itself. What happens to the dream when the dreamer consumes all dreams? The Emperor heard it, and though he said nothing, a single spark of unease lingered in his perfect soul. The first multiversal war was won, But peace, as always, is where the next conflict begins. Silence settled upon eternity like a shroud. The storm of the first multiversal war had burned itself out, and in its wake, only light remained. Yet it was not a gentle light. It was absolute, the kind that erases shadow entirely. In that stillness, the Emperor stood at the center of all things, his presence woven through the foundations of infinite worlds. He had become what every universe once whispered in fear and awe. The constant, the axis, the unmoving truth. And yet not all bowed. There were beings older than creation, older even than time itself. Those who were never born and could never truly die. They were not gods nor mortals, but principles given shape, the living embodiments of existence's own functions. They called themselves the Endless. They were dream and death, desire and despair, destiny and delirium, eternal siblings who governed the essence of what makes reality real. They did not rule through power but through inevitability. And as the Emperor's will began to overwrite the multiverse, the Endless stirred. They did not rage or roar. They simply appeared like truths remembered after forgetting. Dream spoke first, his voice the echo of a billion sleeping minds. "You cannot command what must be free," he said. "The dream is not yours to perfect." His eyes, twin galaxies of imagination, regarded the Emperor with neither fear nor reverence. The Emperor's gaze burned like suns. "Dream is chaos unbound. It breeds hope, but also madness. It is mercy, but also illusion. I have ended illusion." "Then you have ended meaning," Dream replied. From the darkness beside him stepped Death. Her presence was quiet, unthreatening, a pale figure crowned with the inevitability of endings. Where she walked, the light dimmed not in defiance, but in reverence. "You are not the first to seek to stop me," she said softly. "All who conquer must eventually come to me. Even you, I have surpassed mortality," the Emperor declared. "Death has no dominion over what has no end." Her smile was almost kind. "Everything that exists must end, Emperor. If you refuse, you become what you most despise, stagnation." Behind her came Destiny, wrapped in the pages of his own book, the story of all that was and will be. His blind eyes turned to the Emperor. "You seek to write the final chapter," he murmured, "but the story writes itself. The ink of fate flows from countless hands. Even yours, and then Desire stepped forward, radiant and cruel, voice like honey and blade. He wants order, yes, but only because he fears the unknown, because he cannot stand to want anymore." She smiled, and the multiverse trembled at the power of her words. "That's your weakness, Emperor. You cannot desire, you only command." The Emperor stood among them, radiant as a billion stars, yet the more they spoke, the more he felt the edges of his perfection fray. Their presence was not resistance through might, it was reflection. They showed him everything he had cast aside in pursuit of order. He raised his hand, and the void shook. "I am not bound by dream, by death, by fate, or by want. I am humanity made pure. I am the will that survives the impossible dream's cloak rippled in the unseen wind." "Then prove it. Enter my realm and bring your order there. Shape a dream without chaos, without freedom. See what remains." And so he did. The Emperor stepped into the realm of dream, where thoughts become worlds and symbols breathe. It was vast beyond measurement, filled with the architecture of imagination. Castles of memory, oceans of story, stars forged from human hope. He extended his will, reshaping the landscape into symmetry, draining uncertainty from every shape. Dreams became lucid, predictable, clean. No nightmares, no contradictions, and in that moment Dream fell silent. His realm perfected ceased to move. The rivers of creativity froze mid-flow, the stars ceased to sing. The dreamers in 1,000 worlds awoke screaming, not from terror but from emptiness. The Emperor turned to Dream, who now knelt amid his still creation. "You see? Without chaos there is peace," Dream looked up, sorrow in his infinite eyes. "Without chaos there is nothing." His form began to fade, absorbed into the Emperor's light. His power became knowledge, his essence folded into order, and with that the realm of Dream, once infinite, now silent, was gone. Next came death. She did not fight. She merely stood before him and said, "If you would conquer me, you must carry all that dies." And so he did. He reached into the heart of reality and gathered the final breath of every being that ever existed. Every whisper, every end, every silence. It filled him, endless and crushing. He felt the weight of loss, of love unfinished, of grief eternal. His mind strained under it, but he endured. Death's pale form flickered once, then dissolved into his brilliance. She left behind only her smile, lingering like a memory of mercy. One by one the others followed. Destiny's book closed as the Emperor's hand pressed upon its cover. Desire's flame extinguished as he willed contentment into every heart. Despair crumbled into dust, having no place in a flawless world. Delirium, youngest and strangest, simply laughed as she vanished. Her last words echoing through his mind. "You'll miss me when you're gone." When it was over, the Emperor stood alone amid the ruins of the metaphysical. The endless were no more, the functions they embodied. Dream, death, desire, destiny were now part of him. He was no longer merely ruler of men or gods. He was the mechanism of existence itself. The multiverse pulsed in harmony with his thought. Every atom of creation synchronized to his heartbeat. There was no suffering, no confusion, no fear, but there was no song either. He looked into the mirror of the void and saw not light but stillness. The beauty of life had been its impermanence, its chaos, its yearning. Without it, even perfection felt sterile. The Emperor had won every war, but he had also slain everything that made victory worth having. And then, through the silence, came a whisper, not from any universe, but from within himself. "I am Dream," it said, "and I am still here." He froze. For the first time since his awakening, he felt something unfamiliar. Doubt that was not weakness, but memory. The remnants of what he had absorbed began to stir inside him. The yearning of desire, the inevitability of death, the wonder of Dream. They spoke as one voice, not defiant but pleading. "You cannot end what defines you." The Emperor closed his eyes. For a moment his perfect light flickered, revealing beneath it the shadow of a man, tired, mortal, alone. The fall of the endless was not their end. It was his beginning to remember what he once was. The light trembled, the multiverse held its breath, and in that breath, for the first time since eternity began, the Emperor of mankind dreamed. From the quiet that followed his dream came creation, not by design, not by decree, but by consequence. For in absorbing the endless, the Emperor had taken within himself the primal functions of the cosmos, to dream, to desire, to die, to be reborn. His will was no longer solitary. It pulsed, multiplied, radiated through every layer of existence. The light that once bound humanity began to seed the multiverse with echoes of his thought, and from those echoes life awoke. They were not men, not gods, not demons. They were ideas given form, fragments of his mind cast into infinite possibility. Some emerged in shapes familiar to humanity, radiant and tall, bearing wings of light and eyes of molten gold. Others were abstract, their bodies woven from geometry and flame, or from patterns of music and memory. Each one carried a portion of him, but none were truly him. They called themselves the children of the light. Their birth was not witnessed. It was felt. Across universes, the stars burned brighter, their energy carrying whispers of thought. Planets trembled as matter gained consciousness for the first time. The air shimmered with sentience, the oceans dreamed, and the void itself began to hum with awareness. They awoke speaking his name, though none of them knew why. In the heart of the Emperor's perfected realm they gathered, countless beings drawn by instinct toward the source of their existence. They filled the skies like constellations come alive, each one glowing with the resonance of his essence. Some wept, overwhelmed by the beauty of his presence. Others gazed upon him and saw not a god but a mirror, an answer to a question they had not yet learned to ask. The Emperor looked upon them and understood what he had done. In erasing chaos, he had become creation itself, and creation could not remain empty. These were not servants or soldiers, they were his legacy, the living expressions of what remained human within his infinity. And as he watched them move, speak, and wonder, he felt something stir within the vast stillness of his being. Pride, tinged with something dangerously close to love, they learned quickly. The children built cities of light across realities, floating citadels that resonated with the frequencies of his mind. They forged songs that shaped matter, words that could command gravity, gestures that bent the flow of time. They did not worship him as their forebears once had. They simply knew him, as a child knows the warmth of the sun. And for a time, all was harmony. But perfection cannot exist without the memory of imperfection. And memory once buried always returns. Among the children, some began to question. One, radiant and vast, who called herself Aurelion, looked beyond the golden skies and felt unease. "If we are his thought," she said, "then are we truly alive?" Others dismissed her, content in their eternal purpose. But her question spread like a spark through crystal. "We build," she said, "but to what end? We sing, but for whose joy? If he is all, then what are we?" The Emperor heard her doubt. He felt it ripple through the psychic fabric of his dominion like a tremor in glass. He reached out with his will to still it, but hesitated. Once, he would have extinguished dissent without hesitation. But now the memory of dream and desire lingered in him, whispering of freedom and the beauty of imperfection. He appeared before Aurelian not as light overwhelming, but as a man, tall, golden, terrible in stillness, yet calm as a sunrise. "You question your maker," he said, his voice neither wrathful nor kind. "You seek meaning beyond creation itself." Aurelion knelt, her form trembling beneath the pressure of his presence. "I seek to know whether creation can love the Creator." The question struck him deeper than any weapon had, for the Emperor who had slain gods and absorbed eternity had never been loved, only feared, worshipped, obeyed. Humanity had seen him as savior, then as idol, then as memory. But love was what he had long sacrificed in exchange for destiny. He said nothing, and in that silence Aurelian understood his answer. She rose, her form flickering like a candle against a storm. "Then we must love in your place," she whispered. From that moment the children changed. Some continued to follow his perfect order, their light unblemished, but others began to drift, exploring creation with curiosity, imperfection, and empathy. They discovered emotions their maker had forgotten: compassion, fear, longing. They touched mortal worlds, appearing as angels, spirits, or omens. They taught kindness and rebellion in equal measure. And though they never spoke against him openly, their actions shaped new paths beyond his design. The Emperor watched and did not intervene. He saw the reflection of humanity in them, its courage, its curiosity, its defiance. For the first time in eons, he understood that order alone could not sustain creation. The universe needed conflict, growth, choice. And yet, even in that understanding, a quiet unease grew, for with choice comes division. In the outer reaches of the multiverse, some of his children began to turn away from the light entirely. They sought independence not as a dream, but as rebellion. To them, the Emperor was no longer the source, but the cage. They learned to shape darkness, not the corruption of old, but a new kind of absence born from pure will. They forged realms unseen where the light could not reach. Aurelion herself vanished into one of these realms. When her presence faded from the psychic network, the Emperor felt it like the loss of a limb. He might have sought her, might have erased her defiance before it spread, but he did not. Perhaps some hidden part of him knew that she had to go, that creation required divergence. And so, he allowed it. The children of the light became two kinds of beings, those who followed his radiant law, and those who ventured into shadow, creating new truths from the fragments of his perfection. The Emperor did not call them heretics, he called them freed, but freedom, once given, can never be contained. In the depths of the multiverse, among the children who had turned from his light, new philosophies began to form. They spoke of balance, of the need for duality, of light that cannot exist without shadow. And as they spoke, their words began to shape reality once more. The cycle that the Emperor had tried to end was stirring again, creation giving birth to opposition, perfection giving rise to change. He watched it unfold with the calm of one who has seen the pattern before, and yet, in his heart of infinite fire, he felt something like sorrow. He had built eternity to last forever, but even forever has rhythm, and rhythm must break. The children sang across the galaxies, their voices filling creation with beauty and with warning. Some called it evolution, others prophecy, and somewhere, in a realm he could no longer perceive, Aurelion looked upon the stars she had made and whispered, "He gave us his light so we might learn how to burn." It began not with armies, but with whispers. In the outermost folds of the multiverse, the cold, dim edges where the Emperor's light thinned into silence, the children who had turned away began to speak in secret. Their voices were soft at first, carried on the currents of unshaped thought. But even the softest echo can birth storms when it speaks truth. They remembered the warmth of his gaze, the perfection of his law, the calm of his dominion. They remembered, too, the emptiness. For in that light there was no growth, only stillness masquerading as peace, and so they named themselves the Remembered Night, for they carried the memory of what came before the dawn. Aurelion led them, the first child of his light, the one who had dared to ask if creation could love its creator. She no longer glowed with the brilliance of her birth. Her radiance had softened into something mortal, something imperfect and beautiful. Around her gathered others, shards of his essence who had learned to dream for themselves. They built no citadels, they forged no empires. They merely lived, scattered among the fractures between universes, watching, wondering, waiting. But the Emperor felt their absence. His consciousness spanned realities, touching every thought and every atom that bore his mark. And yet, within that totality, he sensed hollows, voids where his will could not reach. It was a sensation he had not known since before his awakening. It was resistance. For eons he had ruled without opposition. His children obeyed not from fear, but from the simple fact that obedience had replaced the need for thought. But now thought had returned. Questions, choices, shadows. He could feel their quiet defiance like static across the infinite song of creation. It was dissonance, and he had built a universe that tolerated none. At first, he ignored it. He told himself it was necessary, evolution, the echoes of freedom, yet in the depth of his being, he knew the truth. Rebellion is not born from chaos. It is born from love unfulfilled. Aurelian's voice reached him before her presence did. It carried through the psychic lattice, soft yet sharp as a blade of memory. "Father," she whispered, "we are not against you. We only wish to live outside you." There was pain in those words and something deeper, sincerity. But to the Emperor, sincerity was the most dangerous weapon of all. He appeared before her not as God nor light, but as the man he once was, tall, cloaked, eyes like the sun at dusk. "You speak as though separation is not suffering," he said. She met his gaze without fear. "Separation is where love begins. You taught us to exist, but not to choose. We must learn that ourselves." Her words struck him like thunder. For a moment his divine composure faltered. Within him, the voices of dream, death, and desire absorbed long ago stirred once more. They whispered, "Let them go." But the Emperor's silence became gravity. His sorrow hardened into inevitability. "To choose wrongly," he said, "is to fall into chaos. I will not allow humanity or anything born of me to fall again." And with that, the first tear in eternity appeared. The Emperor's will clashed against the freedom of his children. The multiverse trembled. Those who had followed Aurelian recoiled as the skies themselves screamed. Reality folded, dividing the cosmos into two opposing tides, the light and the shadow. Every soul was pulled toward one or the other, guided not by allegiance but by instinct. It was the first act of defiance since the death of the warp, and it shook creation to its core. The war that followed was not one of destruction, but of meaning. The children of the light, those still loyal, sang hymns of unity, weaving their voices into the Emperor's own song. The remembered night answered with sense, with art, with emotion, expressions that could not be measured or ordered. Their weapons were paradox and memory, their armor made of doubt, and yet doubt cuts deeper than any blade. The Emperor's perfection began to waver. For every child he reclaimed, another broke away. For every world brought back into harmony, another learned the power of individuality. The multiverse became a mosaic of contradictions. Perfect realms of order bordered by chaotic sanctuaries of feeling. The Emperor's light, once infinite, now flickered with shadow, not in defeat, but in complexity. In time, the rebellion spread beyond the children. Mortals, too, began to remember, across the countless realities that bore his mark. Humanity rediscovered emotion in its rawest form. Fear, laughter, yearning, guilt. Artists painted without permission. Poets defied the rhythm of divine thought. Soldiers refused perfect command in favor of mercy. The Emperor's order held, but it pulsed with new uncertainty. Aurelian watched as her cause grew not from conquest but contagion. "He does not see that we honor him," she told her followers. "We rebel because we are made in his image, and he was never meant to be still." And in a quiet, unknowable part of his being, the Emperor understood. He remembered the days of terror before the rise of his empire, the clamor of markets, the laughter of children, the beauty of imperfection. He had built his dominion to preserve mankind from destruction, but in saving them, he had stolen what made them human. The rebellion was not betrayal, it was restoration. Still, understanding did not mean surrender. He stood between the twin realms, the radiant lattice of his perfection and the shadowed expanse of his children's freedom, and saw that neither could destroy the other without ending all. He raised his hand, and the galaxies between them froze. "Then let there be balance," he said. Aurelian stepped forward. "Balance is not stasis, it is motion," and so the universe moved again. The Emperor withdrew his omnipresence, allowing the multiverse to breathe. His light dimmed, not in defeat but in restraint. The children returned to their paths, some in devotion, others in discovery. For the first time since his resurrection, he let creation exist without his constant gaze. But deep within his heart, he felt something else, something inevitable. For rebellion, once born, never dies. It changes shape. It evolves. And though he had granted freedom, he knew that someday that freedom would turn to challenge once more. The echo of Aurelian's final words lingered across the infinite. You taught us to seek perfection, Father. But perfection is a road, not a destination. He watched her vanish into the void, her light fading into the horizon of stars he could no longer control. And in that silence, the Emperor of mankind, master of the multiverse, architect of order, did something he had not done in 100 million years. He smiled. The multiverse breathes again. It inhales chaos and exhales harmony, oscillating in the rhythm of an existence finally allowed to move without permission. The Emperor watches it all from the heart of creation. His form vast as galaxies, yet quieter than a dying ember. For the first time since his resurrection, he does not act. He observes. Freedom, once his greatest enemy, has returned, and with it the beauty he had forgotten. Stars are born with imperfections, worlds die with grace, beings dream, love, and fail. The cycle resumes not as rebellion but as balance, and yet he knows what it costs. Every heartbeat of the multiverse strains against him. Every new choice made by mortal hands draws power away from his perfection. His light, once infinite, begins to dim. It is not defeat, it is division. His will, once whole, now lives among the countless minds that dare to think for themselves. The universe has learned to dream without him, and that is the greatest triumph of all. But gods do not fade quietly. In the depth of his being, the Emperor feels a pull. An echo of the first law he ever spoke. Mankind must endure. He cannot abandon his creation, not after all it has cost. The Astronomicon still burns, its beacon now spanning realities, feeding on the faith of infinite worlds. But it is no longer a singular flame, it is a constellation, each spark a soul that carries a fragment of his essence. And as he watches those sparks flicker across eternity, he realizes that his empire has transcended even his understanding. Humanity no longer needs the Emperor. Humanity is the Emperor. Still, the thought brings him no peace. He turns inward, past the layers of divinity, past the vast machinery of thought that spans universes, into the core of his mind where something fragile remains, memory. Faces drift through that infinite light. Sons once beloved, brothers once betrayed, Horus, whose rebellion had shattered the first empire. Sanguinius, whose sacrifice had nearly redeemed it. Gilliman, still rebuilding, still believing. He remembers them not as warriors, but as men, flawed, yearning, human. The ghosts of his past linger like constellations carved into his soul. The irony is unbearable. He had become what he feared most, a god beyond reach, surrounded by worshippers who no longer understood the man behind the myth. And so the Emperor of mankind does what no god has ever done. He questions himself. Was this the destiny he had envisioned? Was the multiverse meant to kneel or to stand beside him? The thought stirs the core of reality. Stars tremble. The psychic lattice of the Imperium quivers under the weight of doubt. The children of the light feel it, a pulse that echoes through their souls like a heartbeat returning after death. Even Aurelian, wandering her realm of twilight, lifts her gaze to the heavens and whispers, "He is thinking again." The Emperor closes his eyes, and when he opens them, he sees not the multiverse but the space between. A place without law, without name, without time, the void before all things. It calls to him like an old friend. He steps forward and existence itself bends, welcoming its maker. He stands at the edge of the final integration, the convergence point of every universe, where all realities overlap, where choice and order, chaos and meaning dissolve into a single infinite pattern. To step through would be to end separation forever. To unify thought and matter, will and dream into one perfect continuum. There would be no rebellion, no suffering, no gods, no mortals. Only peace. He reaches out his hand. The surface of the final integration ripples, luminous and alive. It whispers in 1,000 voices, all of them his own. End it and all will be well. Step forward and creation will be complete. Behind him the multiverse stirs, the children of the light gather, radiant and trembling. Aurelian stands at their head, her eyes burning with sorrow and wonder. "Father," she calls, her voice carrying across eternity. "If you cross that threshold, there will be no we left to remember you." He turns, and for the first time in countless ages, he smiles, not as a god, but as a man. "If remembrance requires division," he says softly, "then perhaps unity is worth forgetting." Aurelian steps closer, tears of light falling like meteors across the void. "You gave us freedom," she says. "Don't take it back, even for love." He hesitates. Within him, the absorbed voices of dream, death, and destiny stir once more, faint but insistent. "You cannot perfect what is alive," they whisper. "You can only love it as it changes." The Emperor's hand trembles. The threshold glows brighter, yearning for completion. His power surges, threatening to consume the fragile balance he had forged. He could end it all with a single thought. One act of will, and everything, every war, every failure, every dream would become whole. He looks upon the faces of his children, upon the light and shadow mingled across creation, and sees something he cannot conquer, the beauty of imperfection. And so he does what no one expects. He steps back. The final integration pulses, then stills, the light fades, the multiverse exhales, relieved and alive. The Emperor lowers his hand and releases his grip on reality. The power that once defined him disperses, flowing into every world, every star, every soul. He does not vanish. He becomes everywhere. The Custodes upon Terra feel his warmth one last time as a golden sunrise that never ends. The Astartes sense his command fade, replaced by their own judgment. The Mechanicus hears the final code of the Omnissiah, a single phrase written into the logic of all machines. Create even without understanding. And Aurelian, standing in the twilight between light and dark, feels his essence pass through her like wind through fire. She kneels, tears of gold falling to the ground. "He is gone," she whispers. "No, not gone. Given." The multiverse realigns, not under tyranny nor chaos, but balance. Creation continues, imperfect, infinite, alive. The Emperor of mankind is no longer a throne, nor a god, nor a mind. He is the heartbeat beneath all existence. The quiet, enduring will that drives every act of becoming. Somewhere, in a forgotten world where humanity still gazes at the stars and prays to myths older than memory, the child lights a candle and whispers a name she does not know. The flame dances golden and bright, as though something ancient smiled upon her. The Emperor has integrated not the multiverse, but himself. He has become the meaning that allows everything else to move. The final integration is complete. There is no dawn in the void, yet light remains, not the radiance of power or the blaze of conquest, but a softer illumination. The kind that lingers after fire when embers cool and memory takes its place. The multiverse drifts in quiet motion, infinite and alive, a living hymn composed of choice and consequence. And at its unseen center, the echo of a man endures. The Emperor of mankind no longer rules, no longer commands. His thrones are empty, his banners faded, his armies scattered across eternity. Yet his presence fills everything. The stars burn with fragments of his will. The hearts of men still beat to the rhythm he set long ago. In the dream of every thinking being, human, xenos, god, or machine, there flickers the same golden warmth, the dream of unity, the dream of purpose, the dream of him. They say he became the breath of creation itself, that the gravity binding galaxies is the weight of his mercy, that the hum of atoms is the whisper of his thought. Some claim to see him walking worlds in mortal guise, a stranger at a dying fire, a soldier comforting a fallen brother, a child lifting another from the dust. None can prove it, yet faith does not require proof. Faith remembers what reason forgets, that light once born never truly dies. On Terra, the cradle of all his memory, the sky glows with perpetual twilight, gold at the horizon, violet at the zenith. The throne stands still in the heart of the imperial palace, silent for the first time in 10,000 years. Around it the custodes keep vigil, though their master's voice has long faded. They do not guard a god anymore. They guard an idea, and the idea is enough. Across the galaxy, humanity has changed. They no longer call themselves subjects of the Imperium Absolutus. They are pilgrims of the light beyond. Worlds once bound by decree now thrive in freedom. The Adeptus Mechanicus, once slaves to code and ritual, now build not from fear but from curiosity. The Astartes, once immortal soldiers, now serve as mentors, poets, wanderers, seeking meaning beyond victory. The ecclesiarchy speaks less of worship and more of remembrance, the reverence not for what he was, but for what he taught. To be human is to strive not to obey. Even the children of the light endure. Those who once followed Aurelian move between realities as keepers of balance, unseen but ever watchful. They whisper into dreams, guiding civilizations away from despair and toward wonder. To some they are angels, to others myths. To Aurelian they are family. She walks the space between worlds, neither divine nor mortal, a being of light tempered by understanding. She feels his essence still, a pulse beneath the skin of the cosmos, and though she knows he no longer watches, she speaks to him as if he does. "You gave us your order," she says, "and then you gave us your freedom. We will spend eternity learning what to do with both." And somewhere, far beyond her perception, the universe answers, not with sound, but with coincidence. A star ignites at the edge of an unformed galaxy. A dying sun rekindles itself for one final blaze. Two lovers on a forgotten world look at the same night sky and see the same constellation for the first time. Such are his miracles now, not proclamations but quiet alignments of fate. Time itself begins to soften. The rigid lines of cause and effect blur, allowing possibility to bloom again. The multiverse becomes what it always should have been. Not a cage, not a battlefield, but a story. Endless, self-telling, self-renewing. Each universe sings a different verse, yet all harmonize around a single refrain, the will to exist. And within that song, humanity thrives. They no longer remember the wars that shaped them, the heresies that nearly destroyed them, the emperor who once ruled them. But they live by instincts he forged: courage, curiosity, compassion, and defiance. These are their sacred relics now, carried not in shrines but in the choices they make every day. When they build for others. When they fight for what must never be lost. Hope. It is enough, for in the end that was what he wanted. Not obedience, not worship, but endurance. The dream of a species that could outlive even its god. And yet, in the deep quiet beyond all worlds, a faint glow persists, a shape formed of memory and will. It sits upon no throne. It holds no crown. Its face is neither young nor old, neither divine nor human. It is the idea of a man who refused to die, watching as creation continues without him. His golden eyes reflect the light of 1,000,000 suns. His lips curve in the smallest smile, one born not of victory but of peace. He whispers a final truth into the stillness, and though no one hears it, the words ripple through the fabric of eternity. You are free. That is my empire. The light around him fades, not gone, transformed, diffused through every living thing. The last trace of the emperor dissolves into the song of the stars, joining the rhythm of infinity. And somewhere, in a world not yet born, a child looks up at the night sky and feels something vast and kind staring back. She does not know his name. She does not need to, because the emperor of mankind is not a memory, nor a myth, nor a god. He is the spark that endures in every act of creation, the light beyond every throne, the will that refuses to end, and as long as one mind dares to imagine a better world, the emperor still lives.